much. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you to John Rensenbrink in particular. John in the back there, I just want to say a big thank you. We as Greens have been ahead of the curve. And where's Jackie? I want to say a big thank you to Jackie as well for arranging. So, you know, we as Greens have been ahead of the curve in many ways on green energy, on climate change, on conflict resolution, on equal marriage, you name it, on single-payer health care, on education as a human right, including free higher education. So many ways we've been ahead of the curve, and all of a sudden the curve is catching up to us really fast. So, you know, I just really want to acknowledge all the hard work that everybody has done, everyone in this room, and you know, just am really grateful. And Maine Greens in particular, you've been around for a really long time. I don't know if you're the first state Green Party, but yes, let's hear it for this. And, you know, and it's, as Greens we know, the work is, it's building a party, but it's also building our social movements and fighting for green energy and instant runoff voting and for peace. And for a green economy, and to stop the pipelines, and for Black Lives Matter, and for indigenous rights. It's all these movements that we've been fighting. And what's really exciting is how this is coming together. It's a big wake-up moment right now. Excuse me. I'm talking too much these days. It's a big wake-up moment, and people are realizing we can't do this, you know, without each other. That as social movements, you know, it's not enough to save the climate unless we're also, you know, saving jobs in the economy, because there's no way people are going to move to a green economy unless we ensure that we are going to protect workers, especially workers in the fossil fuel economy, and for that matter, you know, workers who are involved in the defense economy, the war contractor economy. We need to ensure that we are providing those jobs. So we need each other as social movements, but we also need a political voice. That we're not moving forward, you know, if we're just fighting the social movements alone. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We have to be that demand and bring it into the halls of power to fight for political change as we fight for social change. So I have a half hour, I guess, and I'd like to make it useful to you, because we're all fighting this fight together, and the more empowered we are to fight it, the better. So what I'll do is maybe use half the time to just do a quick run through on what the campaign is, thank you, and how we pitch it, and how we answer the arguments that always come up. So I'll try to cover some of this broadly, but in our discussion time, you know, feel free to raise any of those issues. Let me just say at the outset, you know, how incredibly exciting and completely unexpected the energy of this campaign is right now. You know, we are at such a transitional, unstable, explosive political moment right now, where the house of cards is falling down. It's falling down whether you're looking at the climate and the collapse of, you know, ecosystems and the great extinction. I was hearing from a hunter last night. It's one of the people who turned up at the house party, who's involved with the hunting community. Not that, I don't know if he was a hunter himself, but a lot of his friends are hunters, and just saying how that even the hunters are seeing, you know, that the animal life is really sick, and that, you know, the animals are not doing well, and they're seeing that we're in very troubled waters right now. The fishing industry is seeing it as well, with the warming waters, the usual catches going other places, not to mention the die-offs that are taking place. You know, the climate, the news came out last week, which was only covered by two very obscure journals. One of them was insuranceindustry.com. But a senior advisor at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a senior advisor had come to this meeting of this conference of insurance industry to basically tell them that, that it's what troubled waters we are in. And in a nutshell, she said they had just gotten this oh my God report out of the West Antarctic ice sheet about the breakup of that ice sheet, and that we should be expecting 9 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2050, 9 feet, on the current course that we're on. And of course, this validates the study that Jim Hansen put out a year back, saying that we could expect not 10 feet, not 20 feet, maybe 30 feet as soon as 2050 to 2060. And in my experience with the science, which is how I got radicalized, I guess, as a medical doctor studying the links to environmental issues and environmental related diseases, really discovered that the science gets better as time goes on, and it always underestimates the threats, almost invariably. Don't count on what the science says today, just consider it a heads up of what's coming. And that's certainly been true with climate science. We used to talk about the ice sheets breaking up thousands of years from now, millennia. Then they were talking centuries. Now we're talking decades. So let me get to what the bottom line is. The emergency with the climate is paralleled by an emergency with our economy. We haven't had that recovery unless you're in the one or top 5% or so. For most people, it's still an emergency. We don't have the jobs. If you're lucky enough to have a job, generally it's a part-time, temporary, low-wage job. Average wages for workers are barely above the poverty level, and a generation of young people is locked in debt. Here's the bottom line. We need to declare the emergency right now, an emergency of our climate and an emergency of our economy, because this is eminently fixable. This is extremely fixable, which makes it more of a crime for the powers that be to be sitting on this. And both political parties, in my view, are equally guilty. And what happened under the recent Democratic administration, the Obama administration, together with 2 Democratic houses of Congress, because they did have that for a few years, Democratic majorities. And what did they do? They bailed out Wall Street. They pushed for new, trade agreements. They expanded the war on immigrants, on our civil liberties. They expanded the wars for oil. And this so-called all of the above program is basically drill, baby, drill on steroids. If you actually look at what it accomplished, that's what it did. It was great PR delivered with a smile by a very gracious and likable personality, but at the end of the day, it doubled renewable energy, which is a wonderful thing, but that still only gets it to like 4%, a drop in the bucket. It's easy to double what's just a tiny, window dressing to start with, but they took the lid off of fossil fuels. So the point is, the crisis will not be solved by political parties funded by predatory banks, fossil fuel giants, and war profiteers. And those are kind of the 3 big movers in the political establishment as we know it. It will be solved by us, we the people, rising up as social movements, and with a political voice of opposition. You're not going to do this trying to change the Democratic Party from within, and there are a lot of people who are waking up to that right now. What's happening in the Sanders campaign is exactly what has happened to every other inspired campaign with integrity inside of the Democratic Party for the last 50 years or so. Ever since George McGovern managed to get the Democratic nomination as a peace candidate, the Democratic Party changed the rules of the game so that would never happen again, and they've been quite successful at ensuring that's the case. So people like Dennis Kucinich and Jesse Jackson and Bernie Sanders do a valiant job of raising important issues, but the party uses it as a fake left, move right maneuver. So it's used to cast the image of being a progressive party, but then that candidate will be destroyed, as Bernie Sanders is now learning, the hard way. And the movement goes back to ground zero. It has to start all over again. That's why we are building an independent party of, by, and for the people that's here for the long haul, because we are not going to go away. We are going to continue building. Many of our supporters in the campaign are actually also supporters in Bernie's campaign, and it's very interesting. If you go to our Facebook page, you can read what's going on there, and there is a all-out love affair going on right now between our campaigns, and people are really looking to us to salvage the work. And there's a lot of incredible distress going on as people realize what the game plan is turning out to be. That this is sort of an effort at, what should we say, image repair for the Democratic Party, raising very critical and important issues along the way, which is very important. But many of the people, excuse me 1 minute, many of the people who've done that hard work didn't expect that to happen, and are very distressed now at the idea that their databases, their fundraising, their, everything that they've built is about to be delivered to the very person that they were running away from and tearing their hair out about, that is to Hillary Clinton. And there could be no more, no better a cheerleader for Wall Street, endless war, and the Walmart economy than Hillary Clinton. So she may talk the talk, but she has decades of the walk behind her. So as the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And this is a case, or it would be a case, of fool me 3, 4, 5, 10 times. And I think people are starting to understand what's going on here. So it's really exciting, and I think we are proving once again that you cannot have a revolutionary campaign inside of a counter-revolutionary party. That's why we are building the Green Party, to be that revolutionary party for the long haul. Let me say a couple quick words about about solutions that are really critical and really exactly what the doctor ordered. And just for the record, I should say that the way I introduce myself to these days is to say, because there are a lot of people who are discovering us. They know nothing about us, and they know nothing about music candidates. So what I say, here's my line, I say, hi, I'm Jill Stein. I'm a medical doctor. For decades, I practiced clinical medicine. Now I practice political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. And we have to fix this one in order to get to all the other things that are literally killing us, from poverty to climate change to war and more. And and that I'm running for president to help heal our ailing nation. And, that's really true, I think, for all of us. We're kind of exercising group therapy here. For all of us to, to stand up and to actually be healers in our own networks, in our own communities, and for the people that we're talking to, many of whom, many of whom are sort of stuck in an abusive relationship with the Democratic Party and need help getting over their political abusive relationship. So think of yourself as a therapist as you go forward having this conversation, because there are some people who are ready to have it and there are others who just aren't. But remember this, we've got all the people that we need. Excuse me again. We have all the people that we need to do this work. In fact, we not only have the solutions and the vision and the values that are deeply held by the American people, which really are community values. Forget that corporate stuff, because when people are really given an option, they support over and over again in poll after poll real community-based and humanitarian values. It's just that we're propagandized, 100 times a day that all that stuff is, irrelevant and old hat. So don't believe it for a minute. Really, people are ready to do the right thing. And let me just say quickly the right thing. we need to cancel student debt. We did it for Wall Street. It's about time to do it for all those people holding student debt. Forget the guilt trip. Forget the guilt trip, which is used to say, oh, you signed that contract, you made that deal. Well, guess what? Wall Street already tore up that contract. They did it when they crashed the economy because the contract was you were going to have great jobs. At the end of the day, you're going to do the work, pay the money, and then you would pay it back with all these wonderful jobs. Well, the economy has been crashed thanks to waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street, and waste, fraud, and abuse in our political system, I must say. It's not just Wall Street, it's their enablers in the Democratic and Republican parties as well. But young people and middle-aged people who are holding student debt now, predatory loans, need to understand that there is no guilt associated with it. They need to be absolved of those debts. We did it for the crooks who crashed the economy. So we owe it to their victims to do the same thing, and we can do it for a tiny fraction of the price of bailing out Wall Street, which was, if you count all the free money that they got as loans, it's $17 trillion. If you just count the so-called quantitative easing, this magical financial technique for canceling debt, it was about $4 trillion. So we can get students out of debt for $1.3 trillion. And this is a stimulus package of our dreams, basically, because it unleashes a generation to do what they're actually trained to do instead of having to work some part-time, low-wage job in retail or in fast food, wherever you can get a job, in order to pay back those loans and keep a roof over your head. So this is a real surge of productivity for our economy, and this is also critical for transformation. Social transformation has never happened without being led by the younger generation, whether you're talking civil rights, women's rights, the anti-war movement, etc. It's always led by the younger generation. It's just a stage of life, reality, that's who's leading the charge. And we need to liberate that generation from this predatory debt so it can help lead us forward into the just and sustainable future that we deserve. When you look at who is it that's leading the charge in Black Lives Matter, in the fight for labor, in I don't know more for that matter as well. Well, elders too, I must say, and particularly in the indigenous communities, they are just so wise in how they bring everybody into leadership. But so many of the movements, the anti-sweatshop, et cetera, are being led by young people. So we need that energy back in society so we can move ahead with the rest of our agenda. And by the way, if I have the honor to serve, my first formal act will be to appoint Ellen Brown as chair of the Federal Reserve. Ellen Brown as in, what's her book? Something World of Debt.
Web of Debt.
Web of Debt, thank you. And she's anxious to be the chair of the Federal Reserve, and she will ensure that her first act as chair of the Fed will be to issue that financial magical trick called quantitative easing that basically cancels debt for students. So. Then provides the energy for us to proceed with the rest of our agenda. And what is that? It's not only ending student debt, it's free public higher education, which pays for itself, by the way. We know that from the GI Bill that repaid every tax dollar 7-to-1. So this is a no-brainer. It's a real crime that we're not doing it. The idea that we should put young people into debt in order to have the skills they need to survive in our economy is absolute craziness. I mean, that's like saying that it's setting up a society which is essentially devouring its younger generation, and no society ever survived by doing that. So we need to just put that whole idea to bed. We provide young people with the skills they need to survive. In the 20th century, that was a high school education. In the 21st century, it is a college education, and that needs to be provided simply as a matter of course. From there, we go on and we create 20 million jobs as part of an emergency Green New Deal that will revive the economy, turn the tide on climate change, and make the friggin' wars for oil obsolete. What are we doing with bases in almost 1,000 countries? Almost 100 countries in 1,000 bases around the world. What are we doing? We're protecting oil and fossil fuel resources and their routes of transportation. So when we've got secure energy here at home, and we can be on our way to doing that quickly, there's no excuse and there's no justification for this incredibly bloated military. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other way that the Green New Deal pays for itself that few people know about is that we get so much healthier so quickly that the savings in our sick care system, it's not a health care system, it's a sick care system, those savings actually are big enough that we can pay the cost of the energy transition itself. This has been shown in detailed engineering studies out of Stanford University. Mark Jacobson is the guy to look up if you want to see it. And the country of Cuba demonstrated this when their oil pipeline went down with the collapse of the Soviet Union around 1990. Suddenly they had to have, they didn't have oil anymore. So they had to get out the draft animals and put a lot of people to work on sustainable, small-scale, human-scale, organic farming, on clean renewable energy. Suddenly the pollution went out of the air, and public transportation together with muscle-powered transit. So suddenly people were eating well, they were getting a lot of exercise, and they didn't have pollution. But they're stressed out because their economic partner went away, their economy's crashing. You would think their health would have taken a nosedive, but what happened? Their death rates from diabetes went down 50% within a couple of years. Their death rates from heart attacks and strokes went down 25 to 35%. All-cause mortality went down like 18%. So they have a health miracle. And how much did it cost them? 0. Okay? How much are we spending? $3 trillion a year between public and private expenses. And we are actually getting sicker. We're not getting better, we're getting sicker. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, we could have something that's really right with this picture, actually a win-win-win solution with the Green New Deal, which is really what we need for the economy, for the climate, for international peace and security. And it turns out the windfall here is that we get healthy in addition, and we cut back on the military. So this is like a self-contained package. What's not to love about it? What's not to love about it is that the predators are guarding the chicken coop here. It's the foxes who are deciding our policies. So that's why our chief unifying solution here is to throw the bums out and get the foxes out of the business of deciding, how we lead our lives. We can create health care as a human right through Medicare for all. We can revive public education by fully funding it and by teaching to the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a high-stakes test. We need to end high-stakes testing, which is actually harmful to challenged learners and is used as a tool to privatize and to close our schools and to undermine teachers and unions, which are very important to quality schools. So that's a fixable problem. We can put an end to police violence, to mass incarceration, and to the racist war on drugs. And that's another move that a president could do if she wanted on her very first day in office. And by the way, in order to be a feminist in this election, you don't also have to be an imperialist and a militarist. I think many people would rightly say is not compatible. It's contrary to the very notion of feminism, which is supposed to be about womanhood in the largest sense possible. It's not just about becoming a successful CEO. So, militarism. Let me say also, Black Lives Matter, that we can provide every community with a full-time investigator, so you don't need an act of God from the Department of Justice in order to look into cases of death at the hands of police. Everyone should be investigated. The point I was going to make a moment ago was that on her first day in office, the president actually can instruct the Drug Enforcement Agency to do a really, really radical thing. And that would be to use science in deciding what substances are considered listed and what substances are not. Because if science were used, then two substances in particular would immediately go off the list. One is cannabis and the other one is hemp. And that would be a good thing. And another quick word about immigrant rights. This is another crisis we can solve very quickly. Not only do we need a welcoming path to citizenship for immigrants who are at the heart and soul of our communities and have always been in this country, but the most important thing we can do about the immigrant crisis is to actually stop causing it in the first place through policies like NAFTA, through the war on drugs, and through CIA coups, invasions, and death squads, U.S.-trained death squads that are overturning democracy. Essentially what we've been doing is creating refugees, economic, political, and violence refugees who come here and then we criminalize them. So we would put an immediate halt to the deportations, the detentions, and the night raids, which are absolutely shameful. The Democratic Party has taught the immigrant community that the Republicans may be the party of hate and fear-mongering, but the Democrats, unfortunately, are the party of night raids, detentions, and deportations. So we can turn all that around. And finally, we can have a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy, not on military and economic domination, because how exactly is that working out for us these days? $6 trillion since 9/11 is what we have spent, which comes down to $75,000 for every household. Every one of us in this room will have paid $75,000 by the time we're done paying for this war and the chronic care and the injuries of the soldiers who fought it. So this is not a successful game plan, and it's not a good idea to continue that game plan to deal with all the failures. We want to go back to the drawing boards, because it turns out, guess what? This whole international jihadi thing was actually a creation of the CIA and the Saudis together to combat the Russians in Afghanistan. And then that blew up into Al-Qaeda, and then that blew up into ISIS, and the Saudis continue to fund this through their madrasas, which is where international terrorists get trained. And why are the Saudis surviving in their current form? It's because of our support for them, because they gave us oil, in turn we gave them weapons and carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. So with one hand, we and our allies are funding, or I should say it this way. With one hand, we are fighting terrorism, and with the other hand, we and our allies are funding terrorism, arming terrorism, and training terrorism. So we need to go back to basic principles here and have a foreign policy founded on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. We need a peace offensive in the Middle East to move forward on this quickly. We are the major supplier of arms to all sides in the Middle East and everywhere around the world, and that tells you something about what's the method behind this madness. Because it's certainly not working as a foreign policy or anything else. Masses of refugees that are tearing apart the Middle East and Europe, failed states, and worse terrorist threats. So what is the method behind the madness? Unfortunately, I think it has everything to do with the power of the war profiteers and their cozy relationship with both political parties. Exactly. And that's another problem that we can actually put an end to. By stopping the revolving door, we need to get money out of politics. That's not so hard. We actually passed it in Massachusetts. I think you have that here in Maine, do you not? Do you still have that? Sort of. And it gets peeled back all the time. Well, that happened to us right after it was passed. We passed it as a referendum by a 2-to-1 margin, and the Democratic legislature, this is how I became a confirmed Green, by the way, the Democratic legislature, on a voice vote in the Democratic caucus, repealed public financing for political campaigns. That told me back in 2002 that the revolution will never happen inside of the Democratic Party, and that has continued to play out. So this is the world we can create. It's a world that works for all of us, and that works for us as America, and works for everybody. And so the big thing thrown at us all the time is, but if you do that, you're going to spoil the election. Well, first of all, it was the Supreme Court that spoiled the election. Let's just be clear about that. not Ralph Nader. The votes that Nader got in Florida, any one of the small parties could be blamed for having tipped that race. So what, you're telling us that we will have only 2 corporate voices ever in every election? I think that exactly is the problem. That's not the solution. It always boggles my mind when people who think of themselves as liberal or progressive or advocates for democracy say that we have to silence all voices. Democracy is about voices. It's about values and voices. It's not about fear and silence. And the politics of fear, that tells you you have to vote against what you're afraid of, not for what you believe. What's the track record of that strategy? The politics of fear has actually delivered everything we were afraid of. All those reasons we were told you couldn't stand up and have a principled vote for Cynthia McKinney, or for David Cobb, for that matter. All the reasons we were told, or for Ralph Nader, was because, you don't want the expanding wars. You don't want the massive bailouts for Wall Street. Well, under a Democratic White House and 2 Democratic houses of Congress, we have bailed out Wall Street to the tune of $17 trillion. Barack Obama himself undertook this, massive several trillion-dollar bailout right at the start. Under George Bush, it was like a $700 billion as opposed to many trillion. So, if you actually look at the record, not what they say, but what they do, it's been an all-out disaster. The whole climate thing turned out to be, all of the above did in fact turn out to be drill baby drill on steroids. So we got exactly what we were afraid of by allowing ourselves to be silenced, to allowing the politics of fear to win the day. And, democracy needs voices and values. It needs a moral compass. We have to be that moral compass. At the end of the day, we have to stand up. And I would say we have to stand up now because the clock is ticking. We cannot wait. Gradualism is not a solution here by any event. And remember this, when people say you got to vote for the lesser evil, the track record actually is that the lesser evil paves the way to the greater evil. In fact, the lesser evil makes inevitable the greater evil. You might get the lesser evil in once, but then very quickly that will lead to the greater evil because the base will not come out and support lesser evil Democrats. And we see this happening over and over again. That's how so many governors have flipped from being bad Democratic governors to being horrible Republican governors. We've seen that happen over and over. Labor would not come out in Illinois, for example. Governor Quinn lost, the labor vote wouldn't come out for him, so they got this awful guy, Rauner. But this is the cycle we're going to continue in. Hillary Clinton is not the solution to Donald Trump. We are going to get more and more Donald Trumps if all that we can offer is Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton paved the way for Donald Trump. Donald Trump's supporters are very angry and pissed off because they've been thrown under the bus. I mean, that's what the American electorate is nowadays. And, the American electorate has divorced the Democratic and Republican parties, which is why corporate America. The Wall Street Journal poll, latest one, which was at the end of last summer, showed it's 21% identify as Republicans, 29% identify as Democrats, but 50% have declared independence from them. And they are just chomping at the bit for something else to vote for. So if we get to the microphone, hold on to your hat. That is exactly what they're afraid of. And, what changed my whole worldview, I have to say, and my understanding of politics was when we fought our way into a televised debate in 2002 in the governor's race against Mitt Romney and Shannon O'Brien, the state treasurer, running as a Democrat. And we had a chance to get up and be heard inside the TV studio of that debate. Our ideas went over like lead balloons, and nobody even thought they were worthy enough to rebut. They were just like lunatic fringe. And when we walked out, I thought, oh, well, I tried, I did due diligence here. I said our piece. When we walked out, I was mobbed by the press for the first time and the last time. They've since been otherwise instructed. And what they said, because they take marching orders these days, that's just, survival of the species inside the corporate press corps. And what they said to me was that I had won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. And I had no idea. Nobody knew there was a poll going on. And I think they really regretted that poll, and they've never done an instant online viewer poll. Which speaks volumes, because not only do they not do polls to see what people are thinking, they actually engineer their audience, and few people know this, but that's part of what the Commission on Presidential Debates do. They handpick their audience to create the illusion that there is support for the cockamamie things that they try to push out there. So the bottom line at the end of the day is that we have the numbers, we have the solutions, we have the values. What we need is the courage of our convictions to stand up and move forward with the knowledge that if we don't, it's curtains, so we have nothing to lose by standing up. It's time to forget the lesser evil and fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because they do. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. The power to create that world is not in our hopes, it's not in our dreams, right here and now, it's in our hands. Thank you very much for making it.
As far as the presidential debates, I mean, we have seen just an atrocious display so far. And as I've talked to people in the past about the debates that have been on for the last presidential election, I've been so proud to say that the people up there they're just up there spewing, promises that they're not being able to keep. That the candidate I voted for was arrested. With the lawsuit to get third parties into the debates at this point?
Well, the good news is that the lawsuits have not been dismissed yet, and and both Mitt Romney and Barack Obama submitted their case to dismiss these court suits many months ago. So I think that is a real moral victory right there, that we haven't been dismissed. We'll see what happens. The mood of the country has really changed. These arguments have been made before, but it's the court of public opinion, in my view, that ultimately will win the day here. Maybe in the legal court, but it's in the streets that the battle's really going to be fought. And to your point about getting arrested for this, I think there are. Stay tuned, because there will be actions coming up that will begin earlier and include potentially a whole lot more people who really understand that our lives are really at risk here from the utter hijack, from the utter mockery of a democracy that we're living in right now, which continues to be perpetrated by this new form of torture called presidential debates. So stay tuned, and civil disobedience, I think has a very important role to play in all of our futures.
All right.
Yes?
Is there any effort on behalf of any of your competition to reach out to non-voting humans that are American citizens?
I think there's a lot of effort going on the part of our competitors to reach out and ensure that they do not vote. Not only the ones who currently are not voting, but everybody. In fact, I think Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are perhaps our greatest ally in some ways for driving people out of the Democratic and Republican parties and out of the political system altogether. It's really breathtaking what possibility we have right now. And yes, I believe in kids, and believe in families and parenthood and all those good things. But I think there's no one I would rather talk to than a reporter from a student newspaper. Our campaign loves to talk to student press. I think the other campaigns don't do it at all. They don't understand that this is, in fact, the most powerful constituency out there. They just want to talk to the people with very deep pockets. But, we're out there to empower the real powerhouses who are there. And one of the things I say to them is, and this is especially to college students, is no pressure, but you can actually win this election just by getting word out that friends don't let friends stay home in debt. If we can get word out to everybody in debt, we can actually win this election in a three-way. 43 million is a plurality in a three-way presidential race. So it is literally true. The votes are there, and they have nowhere else to go. Even Bernie Sanders did not even get close to offering to bail out young people because he's held on a tether by the Democratic Party, and you can't say things like that. But it actually can be done, and we have the whole game plan to do it, and it could potentially happen, in essentially the turnaround time of appointing Ellen Brown to chair of the Fed. So it could happen with the stroke of a pen. So there's every reason, and I'd say when you're having trouble convincing your friends or your family members to stand up and cast a vote on their own behalf, rather than shooting themselves in the foot or the face, even by voting for more of the same, just go talk to someone who's a recent graduate or someone who's in college or someone who's going to be going to college. Talk to them about, debt forgiveness and free college. And in my experience, it's like instant religious conversion and the adoption of a mission. I mean, people become missionaries in a heartbeat to start promoting this. It's hard, I think, to appreciate how fundamental this is to the people who are impacted, because they're not allowed to talk about it. You're considered a complainer if you talk about the student debt that you're holding. So people generally don't talk about it. But when they're given permission, this is a life-changing thing, and it will go on for the majority of their lives. It's an incredible burden, and they are pissed as hell. It doesn't take much to persuade them to basically break their chains with the stroke of a pen by coming out to vote and just telling their friends. So it's the easiest political conversion that you've ever performed. I encourage people to do it early and often. Yes?
I read the planks of your platform, the little handout that I got coming in here. And should Bernie Sanders not become the Democratic nominee, which use a phrase of Donald Trump, it's rigged against him, it's stacked against him.
Yes.
Actually, Bernie's platform and your platform coincide quite close in many areas. And my question is this: should he not be the nominee, is there some way you might work with Bernie Sanders in the near future?
I'll tell you that we've been reaching out to Bernie Sanders for 5 years. And we're continuing to reach out to him right now, saying, maybe this hasn't kind of worked out exactly the way you expect it. Maybe you've been given cause to rethink your opposition to third parties. Bernie is in that spoiler mode, which I think has very much been proven lethal to subscribe to the spoiler point of view, and he may begin to understand why we actually need an independent party so we can build what he's doing in his campaign instead of simply turning it back to the predator to destroy it. So we're reaching out. If anybody has contacts with Bernie Sanders or his campaign, use whatever channels you have. There are many ways we can work together, and whether it's movement building or whether it's in cabinet appointments or whether it's in on the ticket, there are options. We would want to be persuaded that Bernie has really come to understand the importance of building third parties and not just sort of go along for the ride. But I think he has reason to understand, and he should understand. He started in a third party himself. Before he went to Washington, he was all about third parties. So maybe he will come around, and we want to make sure we're on the same page on the war industry and foreign policy where we differ, but he has progressed over the course of his campaign, so maybe once he's off the Democratic Party leash, he would see eye to eye with us on that as well. So I think there's every possibility here, which would just be such a game changer we're all for it. And you know, the weak link in the chain right now is simply beginning this conversation. All right, let's see. Yes, back there.
Well, I'd just like to thank you so much for coming to Maine.
Oh, thank you.
And I've been involved with the Green Independent Party. And yes, I've been supportive of Bernie and some of that momentum. But I don't believe that that message that he's putting out there is as clear as yours as far as the Green New Deal. And when you were talking about the Green New Deal and explaining how a lot of the solutions to the problems can pay for to solve them, and the balancing of all these things that we're facing, I think that in the society we have a perfect storm brewing with the chaos and the confusion on a global level. But with the Green New Deal, it's very refreshing, and it can bring a lot of hope. So thank you so much for sharing the Green New Deal, and I just want to ask if there's any big things happening this summer for your campaign and pushing the Green New Deal forward and getting lots of people excited about it, how to get the young people and all sorts of people going on that.
Great, awesome, really good question, thank you. So I want to just encourage everybody to get on the pipeline, because stuff is evolving fast right now. We just recently got our check from the SEC, which gives us a chunk of change. Now we can actually start becoming a full-powered campaign. We're beginning to hire, and that means field organizers, et cetera. And you know, we don't yet have a single field organizer hired on the campaign, because as Greens we usually run, you know, campaigns in the press, and that's generally all that we're able to do. But because we're building on, you know, on the shoulders of prior campaigns, we're able to do much more this time. And because we've been ahead of the curve, and the curve is catching up to us, there's just a whole lot more energy and attention and press even, and money coming into the campaign early. So we're beginning to expand, and I'd say stay tuned for action around the debates. That I'm quite sure is going to happen, that we'll have big stuff around that, but we don't yet have it formulated. We're looking now at having a big event at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, which will be the last week of July, and I think the event is probably going to be on Monday, but stay tuned, Monday the 25th. Stay tuned and you'll hear about it. We're looking at holding a power rally, and it'll also be a change rally, because there are some, you know, in the Sanders campaign who are not happy if Bernie goes ahead with his endorsement. So there may be a number of people who are, shall we say, burned out at that point, and may be looking for burn therapy at that point. So we intend to offer a very positive solution. So that's one thing. Come to Philadelphia. Yeah, Jackie?
Monday, can you talk about the debate?
Yes, I'll come back to that in 1 second. The Green Party Convention in Houston is really important, because we have to build the party. Any campaign at the end of the day is only as strong as the party behind it. And as Greens, we have been heroes, and I can't emphasize that enough. The image out there that's used to try to undercut us is, oh, the Greens, they're so weak. Well, we're so weak compared to what? All the other non-corporate parties that have been wiped off the political map altogether. We are the only non-corporate survivor at the national level. So you have the wonderful socialist parties who can fight in one city, or maybe 2 cities around the country. Peace and Freedom, who has ballot access in a handful of states, maybe 5. You know, and then there's the Greens. We still somehow have the dedication and the courage to have stood up to the sabotage, the intentional political sabotage, which, believe me, is out there, the fear campaigns and the smear campaigns. So we have this cadre of really dedicated hardcore that have enabled us to survive, that enable us to carry out the ballot drives, which are tough. And by the way, we need help in New Hampshire, so stay tuned if you're willing. Get on our email list at our website, if you can join at our website with the ballot access drive. We're on the ballot right now for 22 states, and that includes all the big and difficult states, with the exception of 2 that we have strong campaigns going on right now. But we need help to ensure that we get it done. So be a part of that if you can. And, you know, and don't let them for a minute make you think that we are anything but heroes here that have always been leading the charge and will continue to lead that charge. In Houston, we're going to be building the party structure we rely on, and we need to build on this hardcore of dedicated missionaries who've held the fort through all these very difficult years that we've been under such attack, now that the public is waking up to who we are. And there will certainly be, you know, watch for the smear campaigns, because they will be coming soon as they begin to realize the threat that we are becoming. But we need more people manning the stations here at the local, the state, and the national level. So consider whether there's a role you can play. You have to have contested elections in order to have the right people in the job. That's what democracy is about. And when you have not enough people power there to take up our positions, then people walk into them who don't get sort of vetted. And that's not the most efficient way to govern a political body. So think about participating. And then Jackie was mentioning that on Monday we're doing the first televised Green Party debate on RT, on Watching the Hawks actually, which will be exciting and should be a lot of fun. So tune in. I think it's at 5 o'clock Eastern time on RT, and then it will be posted. So we will, you know, they're beginning much earlier this election than they were in 2012 when they held open debates, but it wasn't until the last moment. So we've actually been promised by several major outlets, one of whom, well, major progressive outlets, who I can't name publicly right now because they're sort of into duck and cover mode at the moment. But I think they will come out of it as the Bernie wave fades. And by the way, you know, I really want to express gratitude to everybody in the Bernie campaign, because while it's been kind of a, it's been a battle from the beginning that was going to get cut off, but by raising the bar publicly for what it is that people want and expect, it's absolutely been huge. And this is sort of the ideal tag team here, to have, you know, a Democrat raise the issue and then get cut off by the Democratic Party, making the point that this has to be carried forward. Bernie Sanders can climb the mountain, but only the Green Party can go to the promised land. At a time of political transition, we need a political voice for a social movement.
Right.
And things are very fluid right now,
right,
in all kinds of ways. And I think the role that the Green Party has played is that we've been the survivor, we've been the sole survivor as independent, non-corporate politics at a national scale. That the other parties that were launched around the time we were, like, you know, the New Party or the Labor Party for that matter, launched with a whole lot more infrastructure and more resources and money.
Yeah.
They're nowhere to be seen now, you know, and why have we survived? I think we've survived because, you know, once you've seen the light, you can't go back again.
Right.
You know, once you understand what's going on, sort of the inherent unity of, you know, it's like the indigenous people who have an understanding of Mother Earth.
Right.
Once you understand Mother Earth, you can't forget that humanity and nature are one.
Right.
We're absolutely one, and we have to live in a way that is sustainable and harmonious and just and peaceful.
Right.
And, you know, that's where our motto comes from in this campaign and much of the party, that it's people, planet, and peace over profit. And that's going to prevail. It's funny because from my perspective, I see things coming together. At a micro level, you know, there are, debates about how we unify and when we unify. But history is solving that debate.
Yeah.
And this is a big wake-up moment right now for people who hoped that important things would happen in the Democratic Party. And they're being, you know, history is deciding that discussion right now, and there's no question about where it's going to go. And after you watch this go around the block enough times, you realize it's never going to happen in the Democratic Party. And not just Democrats. It's just good things are not going to happen within structures that are controlled by predatory banks, fossil fuel giants, and war profiteers, that we need non-corporate politics.
Right.
And that's the whole point for building an independent political party. in my own work over the decades, mostly as a social activist, and then late in life I became active in a political domain. So I share the view that it's the social movement that drives us. But I also have come to understand that we have to fight power. You know, as Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. That demand has to be brought into the voting booth, into the political universe. And if you fight on corporate territory, guess what? When the fight's over, you are being evaporated. You're being disappeared. You're going away. Your resources will be reabsorbed back by the predator and used against you. And after you go through this enough, you realize, oh, now I understand why we have an independent party. And there are so many people right now, I think, who are learning this and living this, that it's going to benefit us in the long run. And I myself am grateful to the Sanders campaign for having lifted this up. So you know, as we say, they could climb the mountain, but they can't go to the promised land. It's just not going to happen in the Democrats, but we needed them to climb the mountain. So personally, I see this as just part of how we move forward. And I hope we come out of this understanding the value of an independent political party and continue to build that. Because that's the only way that we salvage all the work that's been done by the Sanders campaign and make sure that it goes forward. So, and I think we're at a much more desperate point in history now where we cannot afford the back and forth because the Democrats, like
Won't there
the
still be a
Republicans,
fight? No matter who gets elected in the fall. It doesn't matter who gets elected. Everyone is so passionate.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you think? I mean, this is going to be a pretty interesting year, I think. Just
exactly.
no matter who's in office. I don't know which direction it'll go, but
you know, I wouldn't sell yourself short
all right.
as a social movement that deserves to take power.
Yeah.
And I would stand up and push back against the assumption that we're just here to be a footnote in the conversation or that we're here to raise issues. We are here to take power because if we don't, there will be no life, you know, on the planet from which to fight for power going forward. You know, do we have a few years to play with? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But in my view, we just, you know, eyes on the prize here and all hands on deck because the clock is ticking. Democracy needs a moral compass. It also needs the solutions that only we can bring to the table as a non-corporate party. And the Green Party is the only national party that is not poisoned by corporate money. It's written into our DNA. We don't accept it. This is, you know, I see a lot of the small parties coming together is what I'm seeing from my national perspective because we're seeing so many of the socialists and peace and freedom all come together to work together in our campaign. I heard Shama Sawant say on Democracy Now! Last night, yesterday, actually, she actually said that she would be supporting our campaign, which is she's been sort of reluctant to say because she's been kind of cozying up to Bernie's campaign, but there's been a role for that. There's been an important role. So I don't begrudge anybody for wending their way to the same place, but I think where we go forward from here is that, you know, we really need to go all out and we need to forget the lesser evil and we need to fight for the greater good like our lives depend on it, recognizing that they do depend on it. It's us and nobody else that's going to fix it. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We need to stand up, all hands on deck, time to go all out. We can create that world and an America and a world that works for all of us.
That's right.
And we got to do that now.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you, Ron. Great talking with you.
Thanks. That's it. Thanks so much, guys. I got it.